Britain's King Charles III also in France. Today, he and Queen Camilla begin their third and final day of the state visit to the country. Thursday evening, he attended a glittering state dinner at the Palace of Versailles. The warmth of his relationship with President Emmanuel Macron clear throughout this trip. Earlier, he became the first ever British monarch to address the French Parliament. Now, this Friday, Charles and Camilla will be in wine country visiting Bordeaux. The trip will be a chance to meet local firefighters, visit an organic vineyard, and taste some wine, of course. For more, let's speak to our foreign editor, Philip Turle. Hello to you. Philip, there's a lot of symbolism. There's also a chance to make a strong political message on this trip.
Yeah, I think you have to differentiate, William, between the two. The symbolism is the image of King Charles III here in France on his first state visit to France. He's been to the country at least 35 times, he said, during his speech to the Senate yesterday. But it's the symbolic image of the British monarch coming here, greeting French President Emmanuel Macron with all the pomp and circumstance around the dinner at the Chateau de Versailles, the trip down the Champs-Élysées, the address, as we were just saying, at the Senate yesterday, and now he's off to Bordeaux today to visit a vineyard down there, and of course the wine-growing region of France. But beyond that, there is a very symbolic image. Beyond the symbolic image, there's a very political image as well, which is the fact that he came with a message, and a message which comes from the British government. It's not the king himself who writes his speeches. It's the British government and British Foreign Office officials who will note down the points that they want the king to bring up, and he will do that when he comes on these state visits. And he was quite keen to underline the fact that although there have been difficulties between France and the United Kingdom over recent years, there's far more which they have in common than they don't have in common. He said both countries are members of NATO, both countries are permanent members of the UN Security Council, both countries are nuclear powers. There are many French people who live in Britain and many British people who live in France. So all of these elements are, he said, the underlying a cause that the countries must remain in solidarity with each other. They fought together during the Second World War, and he said it's very important that both France and Britain stay together in the face of Russian aggression in Ukraine, and Ukraine must win this war for the sake of everybody's freedoms. So that was the political message, but there's another message in there too, which is to do with global warming and climate control, which is something very close to the King's heart, which he also talked about during his address to the Senate yesterday, to both houses of the French Parliament, saying that we need to be careful now, that we need to preserve nature. In the old days, mankind used to fight against nature to survive. Now we need nature in order to survive in this 21st century. So quite a political message in there, but also a very symbolic image as well of the king here in France.
Yeah, and this 3-day trip, highly anticipated, Philip. What were the other takeaways for you so far of King Charles's visit?
Well, I think there are quite a few takeaways from this. I think the first one is that this is what France does best. France is the country that invites the monarch to come here. It's a request from the British authorities. The French then launch an invitation. And it's France on show. And the reason for France being on show, the images I was just talking about, the Champs-Élysées, the Arc de Triomphe, the Chateau de Versailles, the Senate, and now this trip down to Bordeaux. There was also Notre Dame Cathedral yesterday, is to show off France, so that will make more people, not only from the United Kingdom and elsewhere around the world, want to come here to spend their holidays. It's a great boost for tourism. It's also a big boost for commercial ties between the two countries. And in his speech at the national, in front of the National Assembly and the Senate, the joint speech yesterday, he did two things. He spoke in French and also in English. He spoke in French for the French and English for the British who may be watching this from the United Kingdom. But it wasn't a translation of one part of the speech. It was a free-flowing speech, half in English, half in French. That's to pull in more investment into France, to strike up these agreements between the French and the British. He cited, for example, Paul Smith, the fashion designer, who has struck up an agreement with the Picasso Museum. And he said there was much more investment investment that could be done in the future. Now, I think the bottom line here, William, is that we're seeing a slight shift in the way the Brits are treating the European Union. It doesn't mean Britain is going to rejoin the European Union anytime soon, but this marks a break between the relationship that King Charles and particularly France had with former Prime Minister Boris Johnson. That relationship with Emmanuel Macron was quite difficult, and also with Liz Truss. It's a much more user-friendly relationship between Emmanuel Macron and Rishi Sunak, the current Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, who appears to be much more keen to try to sweep Brexit under the carpet and get back onto some kind of cooperation between Britain and France, which is very important not only for industry but for tourism and many other different fields as well.
All right, Philip, thank you very much. Philip Turle, France 24's foreign editor.